working is my connection from that laptop to here and now to those TVs. And my mic. You're hearing it?
I did, only when your voice got loud enough.
Yeah.
Well, that sounded pretty good.
Yeah.
A little ways through, we were able to figure out what the issue was, but then to fix it, we would have had to reboot the thing that takes up the whole line. It would have been a hard reset, and that's taken us something like a half hour in the past. That would have been a no-go.
Okay.
No matter how long they tried to stall.
Yep.
It might have come right back up, but we might have had black screens for 45 minutes, and that's a nightmare.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, it's better just keep going with it.
Unfortunately, if it was literally any other piece, we probably could have unplugged some things. This software has a launch sequence. It's like open this, open this, open this, then open this. Any other version of that, boom.
Right.
And he's a pro. Like I said, I'm seeing all this for the first time.
Yeah. What are you gonna do?
Roll with the punches.
Yep.
Sounds like someone's getting $500. Unless John was joking about that.
No. I think that was their plan so that people would stay for after lunch. I mean, it makes sense, right?
About 2,500, off of 500.
Are you set with your plate, honey, or do you want anything else?
No.
Or, no, you're good?
Yeah.
I'll get this all over.
Because it's all due to this piece of equipment right here. It's all due to this piece of equipment right here. The only one that we don't have a duplicate of. But I'm trying to fix things, so.
I know, it's always excessive.
walk with me?
Yeah, I'll take a walk.
Find Jake. Hello, Jake. If you can hear me, give me a thumbs up. Okay, now I'm not able to hear you though. Is the volume really low or just because you're outside? Because that's up as high as everything can go. But I'm still not hearing you back. Jake got locked outside. Okay, Jake, can you hear me still? Okay. Oh, did I not put the phone on speaker? Is that better? Okay. Because I still can't hear you. There's audio coming in, but why is it not going out? Okay, I think now I can hear you.
Oh, you can hear me?
Now I can, yeah.
Okay.
Bad setting there.
Sorry, a lot of people are walking by.
That's okay. But you can hear me pretty good then? Now through this?
Yeah, I can.
Through its speaker? Okay.
Without a herd.
All right.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you very much. Bye.
All right, take care. I'll hit leave this soon.
Okay. Now, I gotta make it work in here. Yeah, now I just gotta make it work in here.
I don't know about a busy airport, but yeah, anyone quiet place in here, no problem.
The collar's gonna be black soon. Can you turn that speaker on? Yeah.
Yeah, about 20 minutes.
Okay. Is there audio? Oop. There's audio there. I should have had to stay on that.
So, we were talking to those guys because they're going to try to go unlock the run for us and actually put the right things in there. That guy said he didn't have anyone on C or D, just A and B for point sign in. Which means their schedule doesn't have us on there.
Awesome.
Then he asked who our person was. We had to tell him it was Caitlin. It's our bartender that's going to fix this for us. And I just thought it was funny. He's like, looked at the schedule, he's like, we don't have anyone in C or D. Shelly's like, maybe it starts just for tomorrow because that's when it's good. He goes, I will fix this. But that would explain the locked doors and the wrong stuff. Is the guys who are supposed to set it up do not have it on their schedule.
Yep.
Just so you guys
So now, why can I not hear? There's just lag, but that's working. Okay.
A lot lower volume than this.
But better. At least it's working. Well, let's open up the regular meeting and see if we'll get this to work. No, but
That way you've got the technology. Oh, but you're saying, yeah, now people can remotely view. There's a good half measure, no remote speakers. But sweet if we had an email blast.
Record.
Is there any way to check the history on the people who joined the like a last meeting or a prior meeting?
Yeah.
And send invites to that list?
Yeah,
That's awesome.
I can send invites to the whole list.
The whole list of invited speakers from the first year.
No, the whole list of participants.
Yeah, exactly. The original
And
list.
the speakers would get it too. But
Recording in progress.
Participants and speakers. Remote people.
people waiting.
hello? 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 Oh, thank you. Live meeting. I don't have to join that and back over there, but can you
Get some distance.
outside of
Here, that custom something.
Hello, Jake.
Hi, can you still hear me?
Yeah.
I can hear you fine.
Give me just 1 second. I need to adjust a couple levels here real quick.
Yeah, it's a little quiet right this second.
Okay, can you hear me still? Are you still hearing me, or is it gone down?
I'm still hearing you. It's a little quiet. If everything's up, it's
so
all
that's
up.
better?
But that is better.
That's better there?
Yep.
Okay. I just got to adjust your audio coming back.
Okay, I am talking to give you a test. Let you
talk to me?
baseline my voice, talking at a normal talking voice.
Now I'm not hearing
How's
you.
this sounding? Not hearing me? There's a delay, slight delay.
There is a lag, yes, and there will be because it's internet.
Okay, I'm talking again. How's the volume?
Okay, but you're hearing me? Can
I'm
talk
hearing
into
you.
the
I'm
mic
actually
a
hearing
little
myself
closer?
come back over this too. Yeah, I'm talking into the mic. I can hear myself just fine.
Okay, we'll go ahead and stream and just let everybody be muted. You can come back.
Yeah, that would be a must. You want me to leave the meeting? Yeah, it's working.
So I'm going to get started. So, oh, okay, got it. Okay, great. But we'll just go ahead and get started with the raffle. Okay. Oh, is this one? Okay, everyone. My gavel. Yeah, I know. It's terrible. I forgot my gavel when I left, which is unfortunate. Okay, well, if I have all your attention, I think we have the afternoon crowd back again. And what I understand from Eric is that our audio is back on the line, and we actually have a few people that are watching virtually. So thank you for you people that are watching virtually for coming back to us. Okay, so the first thing that we want to do is to continue and have our very big raffle for the $500 what? Oh yeah, thank you. So does everyone here have a raffle ticket? Do you need one, Jack? Yeah, okay. Anybody else need one? Okay. And of course, you got to bring the other one up to me. Okay. Yeah. This is for the big. Yeah, let me give you say that again. Whatever you were saying. Let me give you the mic.
Dave, where is your surfboard?
You didn't ask me to bring it.
Who does not have a raffle ticket? This is for 500 big ones, as they say. So, okay, last chance. There you go, Dave.
Okay, here we go, and I need another volunteer to come up and select the ticket. So, Ken. Yes, it's your duty. Okay, the last time that happened, she won. Okay, before we do that, though, I have to remind everyone what a visa looks like. No, okay. Okay, so he's going to select his own ticket.
I hope so. Oh, I'm 2 numbers off.
Oh.
All right, last 3 numbers are 0, 1, 7.
Hooray! And I got to remember, you're
17, right?
017.
Yeah, I can't believe it.
And I guess I want to Penguin Lou. Lee. Okay. Congratulations. Go see Shelley. And that's the one that we're going to do now. Okay. So I guess we go on. Help me here. We go on to our next thing, which involves Ken. And Ken is going to talk about our upcoming workshop, which is on a very sensitive subject to us.
So I was asked to make a slide for this, so I never got around to it. I think you all are aware of the most exciting thing happening in NMR this year, 2022, and that's Helium Crisis 4.0. So when I say exciting, I think we're all talking about terrifying. So we're going to have a meeting about this situation next month, May 19th. It's going to be a 2-part meeting. The first part will feature an industry expert on helium, Phil Kornbluth, who is actually the guy you see on CNN and places like that when they need an expert to talk about the helium crisis. He's going to give us up-to-date, minute by minute, his information on where we are and what we can look forward to. We'll also have Craig, he's the editor of CNN News, and he has written some recent articles on the helium crisis. Hold on, there we go. Craig Bettenhausen. And then also Nancy Washington, who is the manager, director of PNNL, the Pacific National Lab, and she will talk about their situation. They had to shut 5 magnets down because of an inability to get enough helium. Of course, they have 28 magnets, so they get a lot more helium than I do. But it's probably the most serious situation that this is the first time I'm aware of people having to shut magnets down because of helium. So the second part of our meeting will be magnet experts who will talk us about what we can do with our magnets, how to shut them down if we need to, what we need to do to prepare for that. And we have our very own John Webb as one of the magnet experts. And from Brooker, we will have Razvan Tirdescu, who is their USA magnet expert. And I think that's it, right? Yeah, so May 19th, that'll be a Zoom meeting, and we will cover the helium crisis as it pertains to NMR.
Well, what was the date on that?
May 19th.
May 19th. Okay. Well, thanks, Ken. Dan? So, our next speaker is going to be Dan Iverson, who presumably we all know, and he's going to talk about what's new with OpenVNMRJ. And are you going to use this mic?
Yeah.
Like the, yeah, okay.
This one. Right there, where's the mouse? Second screen, so. I'm not very good with computers, so I need the expert.
Well, it's a PC.
All right, we can get into that PC Mac thing later.
We're not showing. Sorry? I know this is Windows. Doesn't matter to me. Okay, in case you don't know me, I'm Dan Iverson. I was the software manager at Varian Agilent for a number of years. Agilent left the business in 2014, and they allowed me to take their NMR software, VNMRJ, and put it into the open source world. So now it's called OpenVNMRJ. And if I remember correctly, I think Josh is actually the one who came up with that name, OpenVNMRJ. He certainly named the group, the VOSSG group, which is, I forgot exactly what that meant, but there are a number of people involved from Agilent and the user community to bring this into the open source world. So what's been going on with OpenVNMRJ? First release was in 2016. That's when I left Agilent and was able to convert everything into the open source world. In 2020, released OpenVNMRJ 2.1, and just actually last year we released OpenVJ 3.1. It's all up on GitHub, and the releases have been downloaded 3,600 times since the beginning. That scratched out 2,400 is how many it was downloaded last year at ENC. So in the last year, people have downloaded 1,200 times, which surprised me a little bit, but it's a good thing. I want to talk a little bit about the OS situation. There's been some turmoil in terms of OS, and that was one of the driving forces to do 3.1. Basically, CentOS 6 has imploded. CentOS has imploded. CentOS 6 ended in 2020, and if you see these little messages about problem connecting to a software source, that's because that software source doesn't exist anymore. If you're doing automatic security updates and things like that. CentOS 7 is still available, but there's nothing new coming out. They're not going to support any new hardware, new PCs. There will be security updates. And CentOS 8 is already gone. What they replaced that all with is something called CentOS Stream, which to me is like beta test version of something that never ends the beta test. But Red Hat has come out with this free subscriptions. If you have 16 or fewer systems, they'll give you, you can get that subscription for free. And it seems like right now that Red Hat, something called Alma Linux, and Ubuntu are the sort of the preferred routes for OpenVMRJ. So the systems that, the OSs that actually work on version 3 are listed here. Actually, Ubuntu 22 came out 2 days ago, and I downloaded it yesterday and installed it. They've changed the names of some of their packages, but basically a few minor little tweaks, and actually Ubuntu 22 also works. The Mac OS version is data processing only, but it works on basically all of them. If you do need older stuff, and the 2.1 version of OVJ is still available. It's, you know, it can work on older systems if for some reason you need that. So what's new? Last year at this time, at the ENC, I actually showed this slide because the changes that had been occurring to OpenVMRJ since 2020. Quite a few. I color-coded them. The green ones are ones that are the result of a user request, either a bug report or, you know, can't we do this or can't we do that. The blue ones are Bert Heisa, so he's a major contributor to this thing, so everything in blue is from Bert. And the black ones are basically things that I've done or something that Khirich asked for. It says, oh, this is a little craft project we work on, so I need this little tool or I need that little tool. So all the black ones have a lot to do with simplifying macro writing and speed enhancements. One that I've mentioned here, I'll come back to, is the bottom one, this one down here. This thing called Upgrade NMR, I'll come back to that in a few slides. This is also from last year, just more stuff. I'm looking to see if there's anything particularly interesting. I mean, it's all interesting, but you've seen it before. And all these are actually in this text file called Notes, that if you install, if you get the DVD of OVJ, that Notes file is there and you can read all these, they're all in there. And this is the last one, last slide from last year. And one I wanted to point out here is this update, this OVJ update thing. People, when they're installing on a new OS because their old OS went bad, they often have to, collect all of the software from their previous install, you know, probe files and gradient shimming stuff. And so that little script will basically collect everything from your old install and put it into a patch so that you can patch your new install with all of that information. And so that's that. Since last ENC, we've continued to do some work, and this is the things that have happened since last April till now, and well, until the OVJ 3.1 was released. And we've gotten the very first one. I got some nice packages from Eugenio to look at macros and menus, the very first one up there. Also, we got some nice contributions from Gareth Morris down here and up here that updates his fiddle package with various bits. And there's, I think, one other thing in here. Oh, yes, this one down here called OVJ Build, which goes with that other thing called Update OVJ, which I'll talk about in a minute. So, the beta test actually started in August of last year and finished in October of last year. And all these people were involved in the beta test, and they're listed relatively in chronological order. So Khirich was the first one. He wasn't actually asked. He just said, you're going to do it. So he was first, and Bert was next. And right after the ENC last year, Dave and Robin signed up. And within a few weeks after that, the rest of that group signed up to help with the beta testing, which is very useful. I also wanted to thank a few people who have given financial support for the project. John certainly has done that, and Bert and Laird and Don Frank have also been contributing financially to support the OpenVMRJ project. And anybody else wants to, feel free to do so too. I had this nice little drawing lottery or drawing package that I didn't get to use because apparently we have some Zoom people back online now, but we went to the paper lottery system, so I couldn't use my little drawing macro. So I'm just going to skip that. These are a couple of the features that those lines of new features talk about. This one is something that Chris uses a lot. It's actually, these are decon.I displays, decon.I command, but there's no 2D data in that experiment. In fact, you don't need any data. All of those little dots are actually annotations. So you can color code the annotations, you can label the annotations, you can pan and zoom the annotations. It all just works. And this axis equals SS allows you to basically define what the axis is and the range on both dimensions. So it's sort of an arbitrary 2D plotting package at this point. Here's another one. DS, you can use pan and zoom, but you can actually do it up to like 512 traces all at once now with amplitude adjustments, panning and zooming, and all that stuff. These are just some of the commands, specific commands. Data fit is a new thing that we put in. It does a 0, first, or exponential fit of data. Again, you don't have to write it out to disk and read it back in, which is a slow step. You can just make parameters and say, here, give me the linear fit or the exponential fit of this data. Pin string is a lot like the append command. I don't want to go through all of these. The annotation tools with the option is kind of interesting. We could always annotate something and attach it to a frequency. So as you pan the spectrum, the annotation would move with this frequency. You can also now attach it right to the spectrum. So if you change the vertical scale, the annotation moves up and down with the vertical scale. And it's useful. I think Chris uses it when you have like a peak that's moving around during a kinetics run, you can sort of put these little annotations on it and then line them all up and stuff like that. The add sub experiment thing, we can now use it always used to be experiment 5, but now you can actually use that for your current experiment. So you can have your current experiment, you can add something new to your current experiment, and do subtractions and things in your current experiment. It's handy. Again, a lot of this is speed things, or making macros easier to write. What else we got? Yeah. I'll skip those. Unless someone's curious. So since 3.1 was released, we haven't stopped. And these are the things that have been happening since last October. So Bert's been active again. He added a T1 row experiment. Anything else interesting? And actually we added, I think this is the Probe Connect. So if you like Probe Connect on VNMRS systems, it now works on ANOVA systems. And just some bug fixes and things that have been done. Now, so the question is, if you want these things, this is one of the things I've been struggling with. I used to make patches all the time, and I've stopped sort of making patches. But you can actually make your own patches these days with those commands I mentioned earlier. I think Jesse does this quite often. If you do obj build, it'll get all the latest sources, all the corrections that have happened up until you do the build command. And it'll compile everything, and it'll make a DVD installer for you. And then if you do upgrade NMR instead of load.NMR, it will take things that have changed since the last time you did the install and just replace those things that changed. It won't make a new /VNMR directory. It'll just update the things that have changed since the last time you did the build. Seems to work okay. And just a handy little macro that I find is useful because sometimes people don't remember the things they've done. This little check mac vibe thing will check to see if you have any local macros that are sort of taking precedence over perhaps updated system macros. It can cause interesting problems sometimes. So that's just a little tool. And then one more thing, last thing. It works on Windows now. So Windows seems to have gotten it, Microsoft seems to have got it right with their WSL2. It only works on Windows 11, and Windows 11 only works on newer PCs. I don't have a newer PC, so I haven't been able to do that. Don Frank had a newer PC, and so he actually got it running on Windows 11. He said it hasn't had any problem. I think one other person I know of has gotten it working on Windows 11. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, so on to our next raffle then. And $50 gift card. Okay. Okay, we got our thing up here. And I need another volunteer. Here. And I don't know you, so. Susie? Yeah, okay.
So it's 328023. 23.
Hey, congratulations. Okay. Whoops. You're in there twice. Okay. No. That's the one. Okay, great. All right. Okay, see Shelley so that she knows to send it to you. Okay, so on to our next talk, and our next speaker, we're going to miss the speaker on the schedule, which was virtual, and our next speaker is Travis Mcgregor from 3M, and he's going to talk about benchtop NMR.
I'd rather have the one that clips. Honestly.
Yeah, right.
I like to walk around and get the
If you want. There we go.
That's right. Excellent. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Excellent.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the organizers of Ivan. Certainly when I got the email from Khirich, it was a pleasant surprise and a very easy justification for me to attend the conference. Just even the discussions today, you know, talking about benchtop NMR, undergrad, grad school, and industry. You know, as an undergrad, I went to Arizona State and got my degree in chemical education. So, you know, learning to teach chemistry. And the more I think about the things that I'm going through right now in industry to put the benchtop NMR into a factory is very much like teaching high school chemistry in terms of embracing NMR. You know, because it's very much a black box, it's very much an art, and you need PhDs to run NMR, to understand NMR, to interpret NMR, and really understand. And so those are some of the barriers that I've encountered, and you'll see where I'm going with this in a little bit. So this is the same talk that I gave, well, it's a little different, but similar to this talk I gave maybe, what was that, about 2 months ago, 3 months ago at the Ivan talk? And it's a nice little story where Tony Bush was an analytical chemist in one of our factories, you know, worked there for 35 years, and so he always relied on us at corporate analytical at 3M to help him when he got out of his league, all right? I should explain, you know, corporate analytical for me we're the central hub at 3M that if we don't have the analytical technique that you like besides NMR, if we don't have it, we know who has it. So pick your favorite analytical technique besides NMR, and we have it, and it's all in one building, which is an amazing resource, and I'm obviously biased, but I think it's second to none. So Tony and I were attending PidCon, and we were walking around downtown Atlanta. This was probably 5, 6 years ago, I think. And he's out of the blue. You know, he's in a factory in a very small town. He's like, I want to buy a 500 megahertz NMR. I'm like, well, who are you going to use to run it? Because, you know, it's one thing to buy an instrument, but you need to really have someone that knows how to take care of an NMR. I mean, you can't, and justification, you know, you can buy an instrument, all right, but who's going to take care of it and operate and all that kind of stuff? And he goes to explain that he had this coding solution for a major 3M product that he couldn't get the ratio of these two materials. All right, he tried XRF, you know, he could get one of the materials but not the other. He tried LCMS, he could get one material but not the other. He tried infrared, he could get one material but not the other. So he couldn't ratio them correctly. And I'm like, well, NMR does seem the best way of doing this, but let's see if we can find a cheaper alternative as opposed to buying at 400, all right? And the reason for this, as I mentioned, we did IR and XRF. The only way they knew that this coding material had the right ratio was actually start coding on the web. And if the material started sticking to each other, the ratio was off, and they had to just scrap the entire run. So disposal costs were a major issue. And you know, for what benchtop NMRs cost these days, you know, you maybe need 2 scraps, and then you've paid for the instrument. So what we started going down the path, so he's pulling, you know, I need this help, all right? And we're always looking for other ways in corporate analytical to move technology out from our hub into the factories, all right? And NMR, up to that point, had not been to any of our factories. Just, you know, it's very much a black box. And I don't have to sell it to this group, all right? You know, NMR, especially these benchtop NMRs, are getting to the point where they're very straightforward, easy to use, especially if the peak is resolved. All right, if the peak is not resolved, that's a separate talk. But, you know, having this pull from Tony and having the understanding and having the other NMR instruments in our facility really said, let's just try it and see what happens. So we just started, you know, as I mentioned, you know, these benchtops are extremely affordable, robust. You know, really the biggest thing you have to worry about is the breaking the sample tube. And even then, you know, you just hose it out because it's all sealed. And it comes out the bottom, but then you got to worry in the factory because collecting the solvent is also a no-no, and you got to do something with that. But, you know, I think we can come up with a list of, you know, I've got 6 points there. For cons, I bet we can come up with at least another 10 to 15 more of why factories just don't want to deal with NMR. All right? And especially at this factory, because within a year of deploying this instrument, Tony retired, and then they downsized that lab, and so then we only had technicians that were running it. So we had to set this thing up in a way that almost, it was just push-button operation. And we're going to be talking about that in just a minute. So before I get to verification and validation, I'm going to start diving in. New factories in a solvent center. Has anyone ever tried to work with a factory and get some new solvents into a factory? It's not easy. I mean, it takes months to get a new solvent into a factory. I mean, it's just, I don't know if that's the way it is at 3M. I don't know if it's the way it is at your factories, but it's a very, very difficult thing to do. So, fortunately, that has been streamlined a little bit. So, well, if that factory can do it, then we should be able to do it. And we're getting to that point right there. So, the whole verification and validation thing is just, you know, making sure we're using the right tool for the right job. You know, can we see the peaks? Is, you know, knowing that the hardware and the software are working. Because at the outstart of this, I was not aware that this was a GMP facility. And so, and at the time, there were no GMP-validated benchtop NMRs. So you know, we had to do a little bit of work to figure out and justify and not justify, be proactive in showing that the instrument's working the way it's supposed to. All right, and so that was an issue. So, but ultimately, you know, it still came down to, are the peaks resolved? Because if the peaks aren't resolved, this was a no-starter. So we just started this whole process where, so this was 60 megahertz. So we started working at 60 megahertz. Eventually went up to 80 megahertz, and sorry, brain dump. At 60 megahertz, you can see we got two components, component A, component B. And if we compare that at 500 megahertz, you know, it's really amazing when you go backwards. I know I'm not that old, but some people probably still remember what it's looking like to look at NMR at 60 megahertz. C13 satellites are a real pain to deal with. I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot about those. So, but at 500, we don't have to deal with it. And you can see even at 500 megahertz, that, especially component A, is on the shoulder of things, which you can see when we're comparing side to side. You know, this peak shifts, the triplet, another peak shifts, and so, you know, where do you integrate? You know, and it turns out that as long as you're consistent, it works. You know, as long as you're consistent, it works. You know, and really we just need a ratio, component A to component B, and as long as that ratio was consistent in the material, the coding solution actually worked. And so to begin with, you know, we just wanted to compare. Can we see a consistent material between A and B, and is it linear? All right, and, you know, we at 500, you know, it was actually extremely linear, and then it was 43 that we started with megahertz, and surprisingly, it was very nice. You know, I mean, even if it did have that shoulder, that was also integrated. So, you know, we were able to show that the selectivity and the specificity were adequate, but, you know, they always want to push us a little harder, all right? What else can we do with this? If we're going to measure the A to B components, can we also do percent solids? You know, because you saw the solvent in there. You know, if we can figure out what our total solvent is and we've got those two peaks, can we calculate percent solids? And, you know, actually, it's not bad. Looks reasonable at those two frequencies. And so this is where the journey started. You know, we were able to show that we could measure the two, A to B, and we could do percent solids. All right, and for a while, things were honky-dory. We were able to use a spreadsheet, kind of crudely, a spreadsheet, and just have a running number and show that the material is working as designed. All right, and just to give you a little bit of context, I mean, these coding solutions are made in totes. So they're probably the size of one of these tables, probably about that tall. You know, they contain, I don't know, a couple hundred gallons of material. All right, and when they're, and they don't use these totes just once. They use them multiple times, and so you've got other stuff that's in there, which will become important in a minute. So we were able to, you know, keep moving forward. We were able to keep track of the samples, and then, you know, you can see the sample, the two lots of materials where we just didn't use them because something was wrong with them, and they just prepped them wrong. And this is where things got a lot more interesting, because the one person I haven't mentioned so far is Khirich, who's also on the talk at the beginning, you know, acknowledged at the beginning. She came in about maybe 6 months after we started this whole project, and she was Tony's new manager. And she's like, well, wait, and she came from a regulated environment, whereas Tony just kind of a little more freewheel. He just did his job as, you know, he wanted to solve problems. He didn't care about the GMP side of things. And so she wanted to know, how are we making sure that the data is what it's supposed to be? You know, so she's thinking about more, if we ever get audited, how are we going to be sure that we're honest, you know, the data's correct? Stuff that I was not familiar with, because my lab at 3M is not GLP. You know, we're just a lab, we solve problems. And so how do you know when the instrument's ready? or it's working correctly. You know, for those of us, we look at line shape. Yeah, so we know the lines are looking good. You know, is the signal to noise adequate? Yeah, all right, we know that's good. All right, but how do you know that? Because it's working. That's how. And it took a long time to explain to them that the NMR is working because it's working. You know, there's only so many things. If you don't have a signal, then it's not working. You know, it's either and. You know, you might be able to change things in terms of spectral width or something like that. But you know, for people who are not familiar with NMRs, they're still very much a black box. The other thing is that NMR software. You know, anybody does LC. You know, Agilent has their CFR 21 Part 11 compliant software. Well, the NMR is not compliant. So we had to work with a couple side of things to get that worked out in order to make sure that data had integrity if it was ever audited, and that we had to make sure that anyone who was using the instrument wouldn't go into the macros in the background that I'd set up to make sure that they don't alter something in a way that is detrimental to interpretation of the data. So when in fact something's bad, it's actually good. Or converse. All right, so this is where we went back, scoured the literature, tried to find some better ways. We've already talked about specificity, selectivity, and linearity. We had to go into and look at the accuracy, repeatability, and reproducibility, and these are just some tests. You know, we just had to document it and show them in terms of best practices. We talked about that, and this is where we started a little bit more in terms of the accuracy. So we gravimetrically prepped samples at different ratios. You can see that about one ratio about 1, 2, and about 5. And you know, you can see the averages, and it's interesting because that percent difference is subjective. You know, I found out later we could have picked 2%, we could have picked 10%, we could have picked 20%, as long as you document it, and then that's your target. Oh, okay. So we were able to pick it, and we decided that, you know, a 10% difference was too much. You know, anything less than 10% was okay. I think the other one was for percent solids. All right. You can see it worked very well. You know, at a 10% difference, if we have a 10% difference, anything less than 10%, we consider it to be passing. All right. And same with percent solids. All right. Now this, you know, compared to the old-fashioned way, you took the coating solution, put it in an aluminum pan, you weigh it, and you figure out percent solids the old-fashioned way, stick it in an oven. All right. Now remember, I talked about the totes being reused. The one thing the NMR is not accounting for is any water that's still in the coating solution, and we can't account for that in the NMR spectrum. I mean, we probably could, but even with a 10% difference, that was still not good enough compared to the actual numbers by just throwing it in the oven. All right. So there was some other stuff in there that we just couldn't account for, and so percent solids by NMR was thrown out. Sample repeatability, you run it 10 times or 5 times, or in this case 6 times. You know, very good sample repeatability, and then same thing with sample reproducibility. Very straightforward. Between 2 different locations, are we getting the same numbers? All right. And then sample stability. We let it sit for, in this case, 5 days. I think if we let it sit in a sealed container where we actually close them up with at the glass shop, they're going to be fine for 20 years probably. Not a concern. So we were able to go through this whole process to make sure that the instrument seemed consistent on the hardware side and the sample side. All right. The other side of things was the software, and this is where Mcgregor really started to help us quite a bit. You know, we found them with their instrument and their software to be extremely helpful in developing some software that allowed us to make everything just push button. All right, so for technicians, for example, who didn't need to know anything about NMR, you just put the sample, we're not even dissolving it in a deuterated salt, we're just taking the resin, coating solution itself, putting it in the NMR tube, collecting the data needed. All right, and so this is where we started getting into their qNMR software, where we were able to come up with just some push button calculations that you put the sample in, you push the button, shims, collects the data, integrates, throws it into some basic math, and spits out a number. And we can make a button for any type of different sample they want to run. All right, and we're gonna talk about that in a few more minutes. Where how do you get someone who is a PhD but just not in NMR familiar with collecting the data, being comfortable with collecting the data, knowing what concentration the sample's at, and figuring out how much sample do I need. You know, for those of us who are blessed with cryoports, we don't even think about it. But at 60 megahertz or 80 megahertz, you know, do you need a 1% solution, a 10% solution? But what if you have a 10% solution, and then in that 10% solution, you've got 1% of something else that you need to measure? That's where things start to get a little bit more complicated. So I was able to show all this, you know, from the instrument side. We also were able to do the software side where Mcgregor was able to lock down the data, make sure it's password protected. You know, so this is just a screenshot of all the places that you can control access to the software to make sure that no one else but the super users can access the data. And then just as before, we were able to you know, have a control chart, basically. Running time, real time, that if they ever have an issue, they know the lot number, they know how it performed, and if they ever get a recall or, not a recall, a complaint, they can look back in the records and have a little bit more information as far as what was the issue with that coding solution. All right. So, in the end, you know, we were able to really implement this process because we had pull from this analytical chemist at the factory. And for an application, that really NMR was the only way to do it. All right. And because it was a GMP lab, you know, we had to go through quite a few more hoops in order to make sure that the instrument was working correctly. They subsequently bought a second instrument to have a backup in order to fulfill the GMP requirements. And you know, I think this has been about 4 or 5 years now that things finally got ironed out and it's working. But since then, you know, we are looking for other applications. All right. And then this is where, you know, looking for the next thing. All right. We subsequently bought another benchtop instrument for very different factors. It's not a regulated environment. The top scientists are you know, some of the top corporate scientists at 3M. Very smart, very educated, very well networked, and I helped them justify the purchase of the NMR by they'd send me samples up. We'd run them at high field, and then we'd use the benchtop NMR that we have in another building. That, you know, just to show that, you know, if we had the NMR at this factory, they could figure out ratios of polyester monomers, for example, or, you know, impurities, or resin qualification. Is it the same? All right. And this is where one thing that I've added, you know, besides new solvents in a factory setting, is time. All right. Getting back to my chemical education side of things, part of teaching is you give them the information, but you also manage expectations. You know, how fast are you going to learn this information? And to communicate that, because, you know, the PhD chemist at the factory, you know, he wants to go, now I want to learn it. All right, but there's a very steep learning curve for that side of things if you're not going to be using a push-button operation. All right, so part of managing those expectations. So, you know, it's like the technical side, you know, understanding, you know, the acquisition parameters and sample prep. I mean, this is stuff we take for granted, you know, especially for high-field instruments. You know, the data processing and data interpretation. It's like, how do I stack Spectra again? Just little things. They're like, oh yeah, I should probably show them how to do that. I sent them to the portal for the NMR software side of things, and he's starting to get it. But then how do you compare, and what am I seeing? You know, just to understand how things are working. You know, for the practical side of things, even though you know, they're a well-equipped lab, they know what they're doing. You know, I'm thinking about putting together some just basic push-button experiments, you know, dilute samples, you know, or neat sample proton NMR, a dilute sample proton NMR, quant C13 for a neat resin. You know, just, you know, to take the inconsistency out, you know, it's like sometimes they'll go in and start changing parameters or acquisition parameters. You know, they'll change pulse widths, they'll change acquisition times, they'll change delays. No, don't do that. Just use the buttons and keep it consistent, because then for some of us who are familiar with what those parameters do, at least we know it's been collected consistently, and we don't have to worry about that. And that gets back to the SOP and documentation, and then also a dedicated communication. I mean, one thing that we talked about with this factory is setting up a weekly or bi-weekly hour meeting. You've collected data, what do you see? So I can provide the appropriate context. All right, and this gets back to the education piece. You know, to be able to provide the context for the data, and you know, what am I looking at? Why does it look like this? You know, we collected some data and we were seeing some wiggles in the baseline, and I said, hey Chris, do you have 5 minutes? I want to show you this, because it's important for you to see this, because it's a practical, you know, we were getting some truncation. And so I said, just put that, you know, I showed him how to put a little bit of a window functions to it, or he could increase the acquisition time or delay, that type of stuff. And it was a perfect, you know, it was a teachable moment is what they often call it. And, you know, you can hear the light bulb go off. Oh, that's why we do that. So that's the approach that I'm coming from is, you know, these benchtop units, you know, are incredibly inexpensive. All right, and especially if we're going to be facing more uphill battles with helium, you know, we're talking about de-energizing a magnet as well, you know, and as long as, if you've got the resolution, or even if you don't have the, you know, the resolution of the peak that you're interested in, but it's a system that you're familiar with, is there another way to get that data? And, you know, NMR is still NMR. You can find a way of doing it, and you can still integrate that peak, you can still get the compositions, and for samples that we are familiar with, we can use the benchtop. For samples that are unknown where we need the resolution, then we can use the high field instrument. So I really see these benchtop units becoming more and more prevalent, because I think it really forces you to understand NMR in the long run, especially as an undergrad or as someone who can understand how to ratio materials, especially with an auto sampler. It's always a good thing. So that's where I'm at for right now. So a little bit, a little bit longer, but not too much longer. But you know, Tony, Terry are my two contact people. You know, Chris and Alex were some of the people in the background. Paul was an amazing help. I think he's flying in today or tomorrow, so he'll be here at the conference. But I mean, the real deal is just think about these benchtop NMRs, how we get those NMRs into the factories, because since then, I probably have about another 2 factories that they're strongly considering buying NMRs, because until they actually get it, you don't know what it can do. You know, I mean, it's almost easier for them to buy this instrument for $100,000, $150,000 and play with it, collect the data, versus sending us samples over, you know, 6, 12 months to justify it. You know, if you have it, you might actually solve problems in the meantime, or you can collect data and prove justification. So which one, you know, in the long run, what's going to help 3M the most? So that's where I'm at. Thank you for the organizers, and happy to answer any questions. Any questions? I don't think it's on.
So I was curious about the relationship you might have with the formulation step, because so they've got some idea of what their ratio is, but they weren't using NMR originally
Yep.
Then you come up with a test, and you've got to figure out some range of what's correct. How do you, like, you must have a... Can you describe a little bit your relationship with them as you iterate back and forth to say what the ratio, best ratio is?
So traditionally, there hasn't been a relationship. There has not been a relationship at all. They just go off and do it. And then let the engineers and the quality chemists at the factory figure that out. But one thing that we're talking about is we've got a walk-up 500 right now that's just open access, and in my opinion, they're spoiled because they don't know how good they've got it. But what I really want to encourage them is to have a walk-up benchtop. So they can use this instrument, so they can start thinking about the practical side of things. How do I know that this product that I'm making is made correctly? So they can take an NMR. Oh, that's what it looks like. Instead of going, collecting that infrared spectrum to make sure the RM is good, collect the NMR side of things, because you get so much more information out of it than you're going to get from the IR side of things. I mean, you can do very good things, especially doing some principal component analysis on the infrared side of things. But that's leaping, whereas we can just, jump a little bit if we had a benchtop NMR. So, a short list, yeah, we're absolutely going to be using a benchtop NMR for open access if I have anything to say about it. So, anything else? Yes.
Thanks. I think that you might have kind of touched on this a little bit in that last answer, but do you see this as being implemented as a more offline process monitoring piece that they're doing quite frequently, or do you also see this being used in your QC labs as like a lot release method as well? And
I see both.
Yeah,
I see both.
Because those are two different...
Yes, because I think, one's a lot easier than the other. But yes, we are trying to find, we've talked to the engineers, how would you go about engineering a flow cell for those type of applications, and they're out there now. They've been using them in petrochemicals for a long time. It's more of the apprehension that we really have to get over, because I still remember. Even though it is 80 megahertz, there's still magnetic field there. I remember just before I started at 3M, they were bringing up a 600, and I guess horizontally, the 5 Gauss line was maybe, less than 6 feet from the magnet, so it's much smaller than the one that replaced. However, the people above them, all of a sudden the CRT screen started going, and the woman chemist who was there, she's like, what's going on? Ran downstairs, and do you know what's going on with my computer upstairs? And so, they were able to, the safety officer had all the information, all the documentation, not a big deal. But she got a new computer screen out of it. 20 years ago, it was one of the brand new LEDs at the time. But yeah, that's hard to get flow cell in and to really make them feel comfortable using it. Because there's a lot more process controls that have to be put into place to make sure that it's working correctly. So, no, good question. Yeah.
For product A and B, were they both liquids or solids? And the question I'm getting at is, why did you need to use a solvent?
The solvent is the one that it's coated in. So we actually took the neat coating solvents with the materials dissolved in it and just put that in the NMR tube. So we're running the samples.
So you don't use a deuterator?
No.
That's okay.
There's no lock. It's just the drift is so slow that we can...
And you said you tried IR and XRF in the beginning?
Yes.
Near IR or just IR?
IR.
Okay.
Yeah, I think in retrospect, had he, instead of drying the sample out of the solvent that it came in, if he had tried a different solvent, I bet you we could have gotten IR work. There was too much, spot size was too small, and so he was seeing inconsistency in the way the material was dried.
Yeah. And relative to near IR, do you know how to tell whether or not a near IR salesman is lying?
No.
His lips are moving.
We do a lot of near IR work as well.
More questions?
Well, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I just hope it gets you thinking about how we're going to get the word out for NMR. You want this one?
Okay, so before our next talk, we're going to have another raffle, but this raffle acknowledging the fact that we have, again, back to about 20 people, 17 people watching virtually, and we thank you for continuing with us. We are going to have a special raffle of a $50 gift card, but only for those people that are watching virtually. And Eric is going to select. What? I didn't speak up.
What is the link for us here to connect?
Well, you got an email, you can check. Eric may not let you in. Okay, so I'll wait till I have Eric's attention there. Michael Respondek. Okay, Michael Respondek, you are the winner of a $50 gift card. Okay, and Eric has your email, and so he will email you, and you can get your information back to Shelley at shelley.mrr.com. And so congratulations, Michael. Okay, so on to our next talk, which will be, I'll in fact read the talk if I have the schedule up here. We all know Khirich, and so Khirich is going to talk about some subject that probably may involve craft.
Really?
And his topic will be signal to noise in the time domain.
Somebody has to help me with mini
Are you, is that your talk?
No, that's not mine.
Jack? Jack? Jake, sorry. Sorry about that. We want to go on, we want to close this.
How do I close this? How do I get
We
mouse?
need to close the,
I'm a novice for Windows.
this is a PC.
I'm nervous.
Windows.
I'm nervous. There you go. See? I'm not the only one. Okay, you got it.
There's a monitor down there that the mouse.
I see. Yeah. This one works, huh? Click up. Thank you. Okay. Now back to it. I usually get to do this last up, and my challenge used to be that I'll be between you and the reception, right? So hold you hostage. This time it's slightly different. I'm like, when you go to a comedy show, before the main character shows up, there'll be this guy who will come in and then do a gig for 5 minutes just to hold the audience in flight until this guy, the famous guy, is getting ready. I'm like that. The reception is happening. I'm just holding you until that's ready. That's pretty much it. So, many times when I come to conference, there is this question of what's new. Not necessarily about NMR. People meet me and then say, so Khirich, what's new? So, to be honest, what I'm going to talk about today, there isn't anything new. Everything that I'm going to say is what you already know. The goal is for you at the end to say, yeah, right. Instead of, wow, I didn't know that. There is nothing you don't know. I'm just going to point out things that you already know so that you can go home and then say, that's true. That's the challenge. Okay.
Signal to noise in time domain. I am hoping this will work. Nope. Okay, that's fine. Got it, I got it. Obviously, I'm going to talk about time domain analysis. I know. Here we go again. And there is going to be a whole bunch of different characters. I was actually going to call this 7 dwarfs, but I have only 6. It can be one groaning and getting bored all the way to throwing a tantrum. But what I am planning to do is just for this person, asking, what are you talking about? I'm going to give one slide, I promise you, one slide, a crash course. What's time domain analysis? Okay. So before that, we go on and think about what's NMR analysis. Yeah. Almost invariably, we start with a FID, spectrum, and then tabular way to analyze your data, whatever that table means. So the source of all the information content is spectrum. That's the conventional way of doing NMR analysis. I'm just changing that upside down. So it is time domain analysis is your input or the source of the information is a FID, the time domain signal. You go straight to the numbers that you want. And spectrum is a visualization tool. It's like your chart page. You generated a spreadsheet, and now you put a pie chart for your manager. Yeah, the pie chart is your spectrum. It is the spreadsheet that is for you as a user. So that's essentially time domain analysis is inverting that to say the source of the information that I am looking for is in time domain, not in the frequency domain. Frequency domain is visualization. That's the only difference between the two. The information content is the same. Information content is the same. So let's go back to the title of the talk, signal to noise. Before we talk about signal to noise, obviously there is so much confusion in the definition of it. So I want to talk about a quick note on sensitivity, signal to noise, detectability, just talk to anyone, each one has their own definition of it. In fact, this is actually from a book. I just took a snapshot. I believe it's either Tim Claridge's book or Andrew Darone's book. I don't know if there are maybe people here who don't even know who Andrew Darone is. That's one of the classic books in the good old days when I was growing up. Sensitivity, by definition, is minimum amount of material that is detectable. But in NMR, we sort of talk about sensitivity or signal to noise as a peak height to RMS noise. Convention, it's okay. It's all under some definition of sensitivity. Peak height on a light is compared with the noise level in the spectrum. That's your signal to noise. In fact, that's what all the vendors thrive on, probe guys. That's what mine is 10,000, 252 to 1 instead of 9,856 to 1. It's a number game, yeah? The problem with that thing is slightly different. I'm not advocating one or the other. I'm just pointing out, here is an example of a spectrum. It's a singlet. It's the same data. I just processed it with different line width. So imagine that there are several singlets, each one has different line width. Same amount of material because it came from the same singlet. But from a signal to noise definition, our signal to noise definition of it, there's a significant difference. Right? So signal to noise we talk about is peak height to noise level. That's detectability is the same. The amount of signal is the same because the source is the same. It's the same peak that I just processed it. Assume they are all different decay rates. You added more chromium attack into your material and collected the same spectrum. Now your signal to noise is lower. So the definition changes. Yeah? Now I'm going to throw more noise into this definition of signal to noise. Let's throw more noise into it. We talk about noise means it could be, we can talk about accuracy. We heard that this morning. Uncertainty, reproducibility, All of that comes down to noise. Noise, by the definition, is uncertainty in the signal measurement. What is a signal measurement? It can be anything. It can be your amount of such signal. It can be the frequency of the signal. That's a signal measurement. It can be the line width of the measurement of the signal. So it is a measurement. Whatever you are measuring about that signal, what is the uncertainty of that? That's your noise. The more noise you have, more uncertain you are. Fundamentally, that's all you need to think about, really. Okay. One more definition. Time versus frequency domain. This is a slide I shamelessly stole from Frank Galaccio. Fantastic slide. 4 components of your NMR signal. Frequency, exponential decay, amplitude, phase defines your time domain. The same parameter information is in frequency domain. Frequency, Lorentzian line width, integral, and phase. Integral, the signal and phase. That's the same. Fourier transform is linear process, is the same information content. I'm going to throw in noise. So you have a noise that's in there. I call it Toby noise. It comes from probe. He says, there's a noise there. Coming up. That's always there. Is there. So there's a noise that's there. And Fourier transform of that just gives you noise again. So we have frequency, exponential decay, amplitude, phase noise. Frequency, Lorentzian line width, integral, phase noise. So let's then talk about signal to noise in time and frequency domains. Yeah? So this is our comfort place, including myself, frequency domain. That's our comfort zone. What's signal to noise in frequency domain? We already talked about that. It could be the peak. Top of the peak, height of the peak rather, against the noise. Noise is measured as an RMS value across a band, 200 hertz or 2000 hertz, whatever, against the height. That's your signal noise. Or you can also talk about integral, how well you can integrate compared to the noise in that integral region. So it can be either integral, some kind of an amplitude, which can be integral or peak height against the noise. That's the signal to noise in frequency domain. So when your peak is sharp, your peak height goes up. If it gets sharper, let's put that up. If it gets sharper, the peak height goes up. It shoots up. We saw that 2-3 slides before. So you can increase the signal to noise if you are measuring height. If you can somehow make sure that you get the best line width there is, meaning natural line width. If you can get to the natural line width, that's the best height you can get for that signal. So increase the signal to noise that way. Alternatively, in integral, we heard this whole story this morning about how do we worry about integrals in noise and all that. So in other words, if your peak is very narrow, you can cut your integrals closer and closer and closer. That's what I thought. But now Gennady is saying, no. Don't cut your integrals closer and closer and closer. But having a sharp signal, definitely, conventional wisdom-wise, definitely gives you a very good signal to noise. It's a conventional wisdom. Decrease the line width within the relaxation permitting, of course. You can't just keep on collecting your data, right? So if you want to decrease the line width, increase your, as long as you can do, you just increase your acquisition time so that you are making use of the full, the slow relaxation of your peak, natural relaxation of the peak, so the peak is sharp. I'm not even getting into the details of line broadening and apodization, any other FT. Yeah. Longer acquisition is conventionally says, uncertainty meaning, remember, uncertainty in measuring that signal, whatever property that you are using to define that signal. You can decrease that by increasing, collect it as long as you can. In fact, to the extent nowadays, qNMR means collect it for 10 seconds. That's, unfortunately, I see that all the time. Many, many times it's just, you are going to repeat your pulse in a quad every 10 seconds. Why aren't we not collecting it for the entire 10 seconds? That seems to be the argument. Yeah. That's a conventional wisdom. Now let's take a look at this signal to noise in time domain. That's the idea behind today's talk. No, signal, let's first talk about signal. In signal, in frequency domain, is at specific positions of your frequency. You know, here is a peak, here is a peak, here is a peak. It is at specific positions. Whereas signal in time domain is everywhere. It's in here, it's in here. That is, part of the signal is everywhere in time domain. Meaning, it is high at the very end of the signal, at the end of the time domain, and very low at the end of the time domain. So it's very high here, and it decays off, and it's low there. So the noise being a constant, interesting, noise is a constant, random noise is a constant, meaning the signal to noise is very high at the front end of the FID than at the rear end of the FID. That's an interesting concept, because so you're telling me if I want to increase my signal to noise, I should focus on the front end of the FID, meaning cut your acquisition time to minimum. If it were only one signal, a singlet, at resonance, on resonance, I don't need more than 1 point to get my amplitude. My quantification is done with 1 point. So the shorter is your acquisition, extrapolating that, the shorter your acquisition, the higher is your signal to noise, or the less is your uncertainty in measuring whatever that property that you are trying to measure. That seems to be the logical extension of what I just said on the other side. That's counterintuitive. Obviously, all these things are caveats of frequency separation permitting. So obviously, if I just have only 1 point, I can only measure one data, meaning one frequency. If I have 2 frequencies, oops, sorry, one is not good enough. How do I differentiate whether that point comes from frequency A or frequency B? I don't know. So you need to collect some more. How long do I need to collect? Depending upon the frequency separation of the two peaks. So that you have to collect long enough so that the frequency is differentiated. Counter argument now. Yeah? So that's the fundamental thing. So in some way or other, maximizing your signal to noise in time domain is related to the required resolution that you need. The required resolution that you need. That is an interesting concept. Now, so that leads to, I was going to talk about signal to noise, all of a sudden I'm saying that it's required resolution. So should I be talking about resolution now? That's a completely different subject. It has its own noise in its definition. In qNMR, for example, resolution could mean, for some people it may mean line width at the half height. I have a 2 Hz peak. When we say, what's your resolution? That's 2 Hz. 0.65 chloroform is my resolution. That's the definition. I am not questioning whether that is right or wrong. I'm just saying that that is one of the definitions of what we use as a resolution. Frequency separation. That itself is a concept. Is a frequency separation, if I see a doublet on the very top of the peak, if I see 2 dots, is that frequency separation? I resolved it. If it is qualitative, yeah, you've got 2 peaks there. You can see it. But if you want to quantify it, you say, no, it needs to resolve to the baseline. Or it needs to resolve to at least half of that. Or it needs to resolve enough so I can integrate it. So the definition of resolution depends upon what you are going to do with that. Right? That confusion comes in even in resolution. Am I going to talk about all of that? I wasn't going to, because this is yet another completely different domain. I was just going to show some example later, but then I have this extra time. So this afternoon, I added a couple of slides. I want to talk a little, one more definition of resolution. Resolution, so far I have been talking about in here, resolution, line width at the half height, frequency separation, peak separation. These are all related to frequency component of the NMR signal. I could talk about, here is an example of resolution. This is a spectrum of antibody. That's some NIST data, MAP antibody. That's, I think, one of those NIST data that was floating around. Everybody was working on this on behalf of NIST as a collaboration. That's the FT spectrum of the antibody. And this is a spectrum where I resolved how, let's not go how at this point. I resolved peaks that are narrow, meaning peaks that are 6 hertz or less line width, peaks that are somewhere between 6 hertz and 30 hertz line width, and the leftover. So I resolve the peak, the spectrum, as a function of line width. This is a definition of resolution. I am resolving. You can see these two are resolved spectrum from that. It's just a resolution definition. What do I use as a resolution definition? It's not frequency. I'm just saying, I'm just going to say, can you resolve narrow peaks from broad peaks? What's wrong with that question? Nothing. So that's a resolution. So these terms become very confusing because we use it to our wish. Whatever we want, we use it. We have been using it. There is no nomenclature. I'm not complaining. I'm just pointing out that there is really not good enough accepted nomenclature. Here is another one. I just put that same slide in there. This is this narrow one, and then I can even now put two different things. Not only I resolve peaks that are narrower than certain line width, I want them to resolve across entire frequency spectrum as well. So these traces are resolved in 2 dimensions. Line width dimension, they are all less than 6 hertz. Frequency dimension, each one is at different frequencies. That's the definition of resolution, 2-dimensional resolution. It's nothing to do with the 2-dimensional resolution we all think about. This is another kind of a resolution definition. I can do this on another dimension. This is the medium, if you may. It's a medium spectrum, meaning all resonances that are 6 hertz to 30 hertz line width, resolved across frequency. This is also a definition. If you want to know how this was done, as Dave pointed out, this is craft. We won't go there today. So, okay, so Krish, get back to story. Signal to noise in signal to noise in time domain. What can you do with it? I just made a statement that use only the front end of the FID or time domain. You can play with different signal to noise. So I started with the spectrometer that's in my office. That's my computer, nothing else. I don't have a spectrometer. I don't have a spectrometer. Everything from here on is going to be, other than maybe there's one more slide, everything is synthetic signals. No acquire, no probe, no pulse, no nothing, right? Just synthetic spectrum. So here are 1, 2, 3, 7 spectra. The same signal. Here is an advantage I have. I can have same signal and more noise. Not signal average so that you keep adding signal and adding noise in a random fashion. So these are the same signal, synthetic signal. I added noise so that the signal to noise of this trace is 50 to 1. And this trace is 100, 200, 400, 800. And that's 25, 12.5, 6.5. So I just wanted to take something like that and say, what can I do with this in terms of quantification. I am taking signal as amplitude measurement, not frequency, not decay rate, not phase, amplitude measurement. This is one of the NMR signal parameter, amplitude measurement, which is quantitative NMR. That's what everybody in small molecule these days want. So I said, okay, let me talk to you about what you want. Okay, the first thing is benchmark it. Yeah, so I benchmark it by doing an integration. The conventional qNMR, why it is conventional qNMR integration, I'll tell you the best that you can do, I suppose, from my perspective. So this is the signal, this is the amplitude of that signal through the integral for, that's a 50 to 1, remember that's a 50 to 1, 800 to 1. We are expecting 100 as our signal. And as the signal to noise goes down, we have an error. Right? That error is pointed out here. Percent error is as much as like about 88% error when your signal to noise is only 6.25. It's a very poor signal to noise from a conventional point of view. But as 50 to 1 is pretty good. There's 1% error at the bottom. Right? In this particular case, it's 1% error. Then I had, just like a lot of people do, I had somebody else look at the same data by integration. Right? The green line now is somebody else look at the same data, their own way of integration. This integration. They got higher. I don't think Gennady is surprised. But that's what that is. So who is who? The blue one is actually a qNMR expert. This person does qNMR day by day. That's it. They do it for the living. So they know what they are doing. The other one, the green guy, is a grumpy old guy. Right? He hates integration, he hates phase correction, he hates baseline correction. In order to protect the identity of this grumpy old man, I am not going to declare the qNMR expert is Hossein Paletano at Genentech. Okay? So we will keep them expert and the grumpy guy for now. So if you look at the error values, both of them are about the same error. So one guy is overestimated, the other one underestimated, about the same guy. This is one data point. Remember, I don't have too many data points at this point. Only one data point at 6.25 signal to noise is terrible. Conventional NMR. So the experts decided it's not going to be just signal to noise measurement by amplitude measurement by integration. I'm going to do a peak fitting. So he used some procedure that he claims very successful, and he was able to improve. That's the yellow one is peak fitting method, not integral method. It improved, and we had a signal to noise. The percent error for the worst case scenario is about 4%. Pretty good. Except that his email back to me was, he was mad. It is a good signal. How come it doesn't do any better than this? I said, don't worry about it. It's okay. That's good enough. You moved through. That's good enough. He was very disappointed that the fitting method also didn't give as much as I expected. He expected because he expected all of them to have the same. Pretty good, because it's just a fitting method. It's obviously did not. Anyways, so I'm a very conservative guy, worried about, oh my God, am I going to do anything better than this expert? Right? So first, to begin with, I started the first 5. Right? Remember, we had the 7 spectra. I took the easy way out. Yeah, first 5, which is 50 to 1 is the worst signal to noise that I have. 800 to 1 is the best signal to noise I have. I decided to work on time domain. So I used Kraft. So this is a Kraft result. That's a synthetic FID. Came out of the FK, and that's the residual. Remember, these are all visual. Oh, it looks beautiful. Yeah? Okay, that's not good enough. Let's put it side by side on spreadsheet. So blue is integral, yellow is frequency domain peak fitting, orange is craft, time domain. I try not to use the word craft time domain. Because I think this is useful for any time domain analysis, this discussion. So I can split hair about, oh, craft did slightly better, and then we can take a look at the error, percent error message. Yeah, I can trumpet, but I'm not here to do that. We are pretty good with the frequency domain fitting algorithm. We are pretty good in time domain as well. Now that was very encouraging. Okay, so decided to do test our theory. If I use only the front end of the FID, I should improve. My noise level is less. Signal noise is better in the front of the FID. If I use only the first front end of the FID, I should. So I just took only the 1/4 of the FID, which is 0.45 second acquisition time. Graph, you can see that it's not truncated. It's truncated. The signal continues, but we are not using it. We are just using only the 1/4. And I can put the slide back. The light orange is the other one, and light orange was less than bright orange. That is encouraging. The trend is in my favor. I just made a statement that front end of the FID will give me better signal to noise or better measurement opportunity, a less error. So it gave me a less error. I said, okay, now let's go and then attack the rest of the three traces that we have. Now, so I took all 7. The top one there is, I want to remind you, 6.25 to 1 signal to noise. So this is the experimental input fed. That's a graph from each one of them. And the top is a residual between the two. All of them I'm using only half a second acquisition. I can afford to do that. We'll come to that in a minute. I can afford to do that because I have a singlet. Yeah? I just wanted to zoom in onto this 6.25 to show you, this is how the input FID was, and we can pull that sinusoid out of that in time. Okay, so show me the result. So that's what we have seen so far. 25 to 1 signal to noise, 12.5 to 1 signal to noise, 6.25 to 1 signal to noise. That is the actual amplitude calculated by Kraft. 6.25 to 1 signal to noise. That's the number, that's the error. That error is 1.5% from what I'm expecting. On a 6.25 to 1 signal to noise in the conventional fashion. So did I do anything about line width, line broadening, exponential function, multiplication? Nothing. It's FT, signal to noise is 6.25. Yeah? And that's the kind of thing we can do. So this is very encouraging, actually. This is very encouraging. Except I cheated. I said uncertainty is a signal measurement. Noise is an uncertainty in signal measurement. I just showed you one data point. I just talked about one data point. Not good enough. Not good enough for analytical chemists. Yeah? So it took several data points, 10 in this particular, 10 FIDs, all of them the same signal. Each of them have different random noise. This is not the same random noise in every one. I generate a random noise synthesizer, I have noise, I added that to that, I added this different noise to this different noise, but in all cases, the same signal to noise of about 11 to 1. Right? So there is a signal to noise measurement done, so you can see that's about 11.3 plus minus 0.7. So that's your input information. There are 10 different FIDs. each one having different random noise, the same signal. This is the beauty of being able to work with synthetic signal. You don't know, you can do whatever you want. Right? You can't tell me that my signal measurement may be wrong. No, I have the same signal. I started with the same signal because it is, I have one exponential decay function. I simply said, give me a signal. It's the same exponential decay function. Give me a signal. So same signal in all of them. Different noise because they are all random. So just to show you how the FT look like, this is the expanded region of that. Now let's take a look at graph results. So that's your, this time I'm showing it to you in a spectral format instead of time domain format. These are all FT of the input FID, FT of the craft FID, FT of the residual. And here is one example zoomed in out of the 10. Let's look at the numbers. So this one is my reference. That came actually from the same signal, but a signal to noise of 200 to 1. Just to be sure that whatever I do integral-wise, I know that that's the number I'm supposed to get. I'm supposed to get 200 to 1. 200 signal, and from a data point that is 200 to or 200 plus to 1 signal to noise. Whoppingly good signal noise. Integral did a good job of that. And again, there are 10 data points there. Plus minus bar is inside. Pretty good. So we use that to say that the measurement made on this data, that acquisition time of 1.8 seconds, integral on all the 10 data, the average is here, and the range is that. So this average, so this number, 193 something whatever, comes from because I am expecting to, it's a relative to what I am supposed to have. Okay, let's take a look at what graph result is. This is using the full fit. Using the full fit, meaning 1.8 second acquisition. Same 10 signals that was used in here was used by graph relative to what I'm expecting. That's the bar. Watch the bar. That's 1.8 second acquisition. That's half of that. So I'm only using the 50% of the fit from the front end. I'm only using 25% of the fit from the front end. I'm only using 10% of the fit from the front end. If I use only, it's the same input. All I said to Kraft was, don't use it. Zero everything, but everybody up, just take the first 10%. So the front end of the fit has a lot better signal to noise. So if you measure something out of that, your uncertainty is less. What does this have anything to do with each other, anything to do with the real world? This is the kind of data that you are actually will be dealing with. If you have 10 repeats, what you are talking about is you have the same signal because it's coming from the same NMR, 10 different repeats, so your noise is random. That's the kind of stuff that you will be doing if you are doing a repeat. Or, now this is going to be one real world example, if you are doing a reaction monitoring. You are following the signal and repeating the same number of scans every 1 minute, or every 2 minutes, or every 3 minutes, right? Here is an example. This is a 56 megahertz benchtop data, F19. The data came from Jason's lab in British Columbia. That's the signal that we were interested in. It wasn't even there in the first trace. So this is trace number 1, trace number 50, trace number 100. This is a 1-minute kinetic time point. So I'm just showing you only 3. There are like 48 in between and another 48 in between. Yeah, this is the signal that's growing that they want to measure. Just to show you an expansion of that, that's the signal, expanded signal of that. And we did this with graph. And you can actually, this is using the entire 2.78 second acquisition time. You can see a kinetic that's in there, and then this is oscillating, and then we could have simply said that, well, obviously your spectrum is very noisy, so your measurement from spectra to spectra to spectra is what Gennady would explain by Monte Carlo. It is random, and there is a variation in that. Except, I'm now going to tie back to one of the discussion I had about the definition of resolution. This is 2.87 second acquisition. Even by eyeballing, I'm saying that particular signal is about 1 ppm wide. Right? 52nd megahertz, that's 56 hertz wide signal integration or signal that you are interested in falls within that 57 hertz. Meaning, I am not interested in resolving the components here. I'm interested in the amplitude of that signal, which is wide at as much as 56 hertz a line. If you want to talk in terms of width of the line width of the half, maybe half. So, I am not trying to resolve anything better than 56 hertz. Why do I need an acquisition time that is more than 20 milliseconds? Why do I need an acquisition time that is better than 1 over 56 hertz? I'm sorry. So, if I decide that 1 over 56 hertz is like 20 milliseconds, look at what I just did. 100 times the information I supplied, most of it is worse signal to noise than the first 20 milliseconds. So, if I take this, and instead of using the 2.78 second acquisition time, I just simply said, use the first 50 milliseconds of the acquisition time. Don't waste my time. Don't waste your computational effort. These are all noise. The first 50 milliseconds has better signal to noise, use that. And that is data point to data point to data point. These are, each one is a separate acquisition. Just by eyeballing, I can tell you that obviously that's better. You improved your uncertainty simply by saying, I'm just going to use what I need to resolve. Not more than what I need to resolve. I don't need 2.78 second acquisition. I don't need 1 second acquisition. I don't need half a second acquisition. Half a second, 0.2 second acquisition is too long. Why? Your question, your answer does not rely on that. Your answer is up to 50 hertz you have room, 56 hertz room. Yeah, you're not trying to resolve anything. If you have another peak that is 56 hertz, closer than 56 hertz, yes, you're your host. But that's not, we know that's not what I'm looking for. So don't answer that. So you used to, Denin probably knows this. I used to ask this question to the group. Don't answer the question you are not asked. He did not ask you to resolve better than 56 hertz. Why are you giving me an answer that from a 0.5 hertz resolution data? Now, Chris, you just cheated in that if I had taken only 2 seconds, 0.2 seconds of my data, my spectrum is going to be awful. Yes. If you do an FT, it's going to be awful. Right? But number one, I'm going to challenge you with this statement. Spectrum is an easy challenge. I can walk away. Spectrum is a representation of the table. I don't care about the spectrum. I have the information. Why do I need a spectrum? Except, I cheated one more time here. I showed you a Kraft result in an FID. Because Kraft output is not an FID. Kraft output is a table. It is a table of 4 information. frequency, amplitude, decay rate, phase. I just presented it to you as an FID, just so you can compare it to this blue line. Aha, it came out of that. Just to make you happy that it came out of that. It just came out of what? I don't care where it came out of. It's a table that came out of it. Yeah? So, if I have it, that table has nothing. It has nothing about my input length. My input length is 0.2 seconds. Tell me, what does it say about 0.2 second here? Nothing. It is a table. It is an exponential equation. Yeah? So, nothing stopping me from saying that, show this to me to 2 seconds. Don't show this to me for 2.25 seconds. The red line there is just a representation of that table. And I can opt to see that table as long as I want. 20 seconds if I want, just say synthesize for 20 seconds. Because the table has lost its information about where it came from. There is no information about where it came from. Alternatively, I can even do this. I can take that table and simply compare it against a 2-second acquisition FID. I can take this 2-second acquisition FID, take this table and say, synthesize a Kraft FID that's also 2 seconds, subtract and show me the residual. So now, if I take this, so this input is 1.8 seconds, output came only from the first 10% of the FID. The residual is difference between the two. I can transform that now. This is the output from the 0.2 second input I supplied. Look at that line width, compare that to the FT of 2 second input. Right? So the table has nothing to do with what was your input. Having said all that, I cheated again. I made a caveat. Frequency separation permitting. I covered myself up. That's a singlet. Of course it's going to do whatever I ask it to do. So Chris, what happens if I have more than one signal? Right? Which is what the case is everywhere, other than in Computational LLC office. Right? Okay, let's take, I am now a grammar school student graduating from a singular story to, guess what, a doublet story. Let's go to a doublet. I took an example of 7, these are all synthetic. Nice thing, yeah? They're all synthetic. I took a doublet that's separated by half a hertz from each other. So the two frequencies, this is just a spectrum, this is an FT result. But when I made this FID, I said there are two frequencies that are half a hertz separated from each other. In this case, I said each one has a line width of 0.2 hertz, meaning they are sharper than the frequency separation. In here, I said they are about the same as the frequency separation. The line width of each of those resonances. The line width of each one of those. This is 1 hertz line width, half a hertz separation. 2 hertz line width, half a hertz separation. 4 hertz line width, half a hertz separation. So this is not a singlet. That is a doublet of half a hertz separation. Spectrum can be very deceiving. So if I were, you would say from this is the FT result. You would say, depending upon your definition of resolution, this is resolved. For some people. That's resolved for some other people. Yeah? Depending upon the definition of resolution. Now, I were trained an organic chemist to do NMR. So I have all the arsenal in my hand. One of the arsenal that I have is what is called resolution enhancement function, a pseudo-echo multiplier. I'm all trained to do that. You multiply by an exponential decay, you broaden it, you multiply by a pseudo-echo, you narrow it. Yeah? So I can apply the worst or the most potent pseudo-echo function, a sine bell function. I multiply the fit by sine bell function, Fourier transform, that is this. So this is the 4 hertz line width, half a hertz separation, 2 hertz line width, half a hertz. So somewhere here, for some people, I resolved it. You can't do anything beyond that. that spectrum looks awful. Because it is the worst or the highest resolution I am going to get, pseudo-echo, just a sine bell, straight sine bell. I think it's a square sine bell. It's not even just a sine bell. Very high resolution. So you can cheat and then say, hey, I can resolve there. 1 hertz line width, half a hertz separate. I can resolve it with Fourier transform. Now let's see what Kraft can do. This is a piece of cake. This is all of them. This one is, you watch acquisition time, watch what is on red, because that's the key. This red, not this red. That's the light red, this is dark red. If you don't know, you go check your eye. That's the light red, this is dark red. Okay, so watch this red, right? So acquisition time 3.64 second, line width of 0.2 hertz, separation is always half a hertz. Right? So Kraft says, I got 2 models, piece of cake, 2 models that are like that. And you can see the Kraft versus FT versus models. I take half a hertz line width, half a hertz separation, piece of cake. 1 hertz line width, half a hertz separation. I'm going to say this piece of cake. Two hertz line width. Each resonance is 2 hertz wide. They are separated from each other, half a hertz from each other. This is the one that we can barely see when you do a sine bell, squared sine bell approximation. Kraft spits it out. I'm not going to say what that is. That's 4 hertz line width, each half a hertz separation. Each spits it out as two resonance. Let's cut the acquisition time down. That's the same one, just the one before. This is still a 4 hertz separation. I still have 10 more minutes, I think. John said 4 o'clock. I can do 4 o'clock. I know, 4 o'clock. Okay, so that's a 4 hertz separation. 4 hertz line width, half a hertz separation, less than a second acquisition. 0.7 second, I'm pushing it now. I'm pushing it. Yeah, of course there's going to be a point of no return. There it says, I don't know, you don't have enough information for me to tell you better than that. There it fails. That's where it fails. So, looping back, for a doublet that are separated by half a hertz from each other and wide, now here is a caveat that I'm going to put. Given enough signal noise, raw signal noise, you can separate those two guys up with short acquisition time. Because from an input point of view, acquisition time, this goes back to 2Ds as well, in the 2D as well. Decay rate or the line width or whatever has nothing to do with whether I can make it narrower or what. 2D. I'm just talking too much. I will go into tangential discussion here, which I don't want to. So, one caveat I did put was given enough signal to rise. Back to square one. You got to have enough signal to rise. Yeah. So this is one of my favorite slides. There is no substitute for better signal to rise. I'm coming back and then throwing all my argument away. I'm just said that in time domain you can use the first front end of the FID and get better signal to rise. That doesn't matter. Whether it's time domain or frequency domain. Even if you use only 2 seconds, if you can get the better signal to rise there, the raw signal to rise there, better you are. or the less noise you have, better you are. Except there is a second caveat, the second take-home mantra that I usually say. The more points you supply, it's a fitting algorithm. The more points you supply to the input, the equation comes out better. Because you have more points to fit. So, these are these two, with my point about short acquisition, are counter to each other. Because when I say short acquisition, I'm saying collect only here. Then you say, I had 32K points, you are telling me I used 3,200 points. You are asking me to take down the number of input points because my signal to noise goes up, but then you say that I should have more points. It doesn't jive. These arguments don't jive. Except, of course, we can do what? I only said use 2 seconds of acquisition. I didn't say collect 3,200 points. I said take the first 10%. I didn't say take 10% of the number of points, which is 32K. I say collect 32K in the first 0.2 seconds. Meaning your signal is this, define that better. Give it more points to define that sinusoid. What does that mean? We do this all the time. We oversample our data all the time, whether we want it or not. This takes us back to 2019 Ivan conference, which I talked about. I tried to tell people, don't downsample your spectrum. Guess what? Your spectrometer in those days, I was still alien-eyed. Those Darien spectrometer used to collect the data. It was collecting the data at 20 megahertz, except that what I said was, I wanted my spectrum to be 8 kilohertz. So I said, give me, downsample this 20 megahertz data, downsample it to 8 kilohertz, and give me an 8 kilohertz. Fair. And so it came out as a downsample to 8 kilohertz, gave it to me. I'm perfectly comfortable as a spectroscopist because that's my spectral width. I don't want 20 megahertz spectrum of proton when all my signals are 8 kilohertz. So downsample it for me. It's purely your convenience. That's it. Purely your convenience. You just don't want that 39 point number of hertz of points that in this side there is a blank, in that side there is a blank. So we are the one who told the spectrometer to downsample it. I said, I'm not saying don't downsample it. Don't downsample it to 8 kilohertz. Run 100 kilohertz of spectral width. What's wrong with that? There is nothing to lose. We made this argument in 2019. I showed a lot of data on that day. If you're not, I'm sure that it is in the YouTube. You can probably go and watch it. Just do less downsampling. The only cost is the size of your FID. Instead of 164 kilobyte, this happens to be 164 kilobyte of FID that we currently save, we will be saving 2 megabytes of FID. So the cost is disk space. In the 2019 cost of a 2 terabyte solid state drive, which is now probably half the cost now, technology is moving forward. It will take you 20 years. If you run proton spectrum day in and day out, every 5 minutes, 365 days, for 20 years, you will not fill, you will just fill the 2 terabytes of solid state drive. And the cost is millipennies. Don't waste your information that you have. From the frequency domain point of view, you lose nothing. You gain nothing either. From some other analysis point of view, there can be a good gain. Oversample the data. What does that mean to all the synchronous noise and all that? We'll see you next time. That's my favorite slide.
milliseconds, from each scan to the next one, you also have a Q.One dependence, right? So isn't there an amplitude loss every time you collect only 0.2 seconds instead of those 2 seconds?
And I'm not saying that you collect 2 seconds, 0.2 seconds. You can collect as long as you want, 10 seconds. People give me 10 second fit. I just throw away the 9.98 seconds of data.
Okay.
But in other words, do what I saying that there is a way in time domain analysis, there is a way you can improve your quality of your output by not using the entire input that is comfortable for you in frequency domain. About 6 years ago when I left Agilent left me, I made this decision. I'm not going to tell you what you shouldn't do. I'm going to tell you do whatever you want. But guess what? There are better ways of doing it. Right? If, for an argument's sake, if you assume there is no frequency, you don't do any frequency domain analysis. I don't know if anybody here does only crap. I hope one day that will happen. But that's not the point. If you don't, you can probably come up with some way to do a 0.2 second so fast experiments in 1D. Why not? I don't know. Think. I'm just saying, let's think differently. Because we now realize that you don't need more than 0.2 seconds of acquisition in order to get some decent qNMR results. So is there a way I can repeat this thing every 0.2 seconds? Let's think about pulse sequence. I don't know. I'm just saying that we go back to the good old-fashioned way of analysis driving the way we set up the experiment. Let's not do that. That's what I'm saying. Let's think differently. I don't know. No answer. I don't know. Yes, you are perfectly correct. You still have to wait. We can't deal with relaxation. I can't accelerate relaxation. Maybe there is. Maybe there is. I don't know. Can you? I don't know. I'm not challenging you. I'm just saying. Why can't we? Why can't we sit down and come up with ways? This is how so fast experiment happen. This is how ASAP happen. Right? I actually have a slide where I showed in the past in 2Ds, it was in 2Ds, less than 1 minute of ASAP HMQC, you can get a depth quality carbon spectrum. Depth quality carbon spectrum with signal to noise that you can burn on a 20 millimolar sample. I just want to know how many of the people run 1 minute HSQC or ASAP HMQC, HSQC as a routine. If not, why not? That's a question we have to ask. If not, why not? What is preventing you from running all your HSQCs less than 1 minute each? What is preventing you? Yes, quaternary carbon is different. Somebody may come up with some better way of doing the quaternary carbons. But we still run 10 minute HSQCs. 10 minutes was a big deal. I'm saying 10 minutes, 9 minutes wasted. And you can get a data that is as good as a depth quality carbon resolution. We have done this. I mean, we have talked about this in several conferences and paper. The paper in the last year paper, we showed that. So that's my challenge to this group is this is not always the answer. Craft is not answer to everything. I'm just pointing out there is so much we are giving up by not looking at time domain analysis. By not looking at time domain. There is so many things that you can do. We are all get into the conventional analysis. I'm not saying that we can replace all conventional analysis. I'm just saying because we focus on the conventional analysis, we give up on so much potential opportunities in time domain that you can do differently, better, faster. Yeah. Sorry. I get passionate now. Don't ask me, poke me on that. I'll get even more passionate.
So I think since the bar is waiting,
yes, for me too.
We can hold further questions.
Yes, thank you.
For drinks. But so let's thank our speaker. And okay, John. Yeah. Yes, we have 2 more drawings coming up.
Dave, what's interesting
Here one.
I think what's interesting, Dave, is we just concluded Ivan meeting number 34.
Okay.
And when we started this back in 2016, I don't think any of us thought that we'd go this far, but I truly hope this meeting was useful for everyone today, and well, more importantly, I hope it was a little bit of fun for everyone today. Dave, if you would do a couple more drawings, I think we're going to do one more virtual.
Yes.
Is that correct, Eric? But I'll hand that back to you.
Okay. So for our cutting board, our drawing is virtual. Okay, I can't hear from up here. Svetlana Simova. Okay, you have won. Oh, where is the Svetlana Simova? You have won the cutting board, and so. Okay, why don't you hold the microphone? Okay.
Our now famous laser engraved Q.One instruments, periodic table, heavy wood plaque / cutting board, and don't hit anyone over the head with it, because that thing is heavy. And then one more drawing for the room here.
Okay, so I need a volunteer to do the very last drawing. Khirich.
Krish, what is that ticket stuck to your finger right now?
Who wants to bid on that? What's that? $013.
Oh my! So, is this the, oh here, I'll give this to you again. And is this the cutting board, or should he go to Shelley to get a wrap one?
That was a $50 gift card. And the cutting board was for the virtual winner, Svetlana.
See Shelley. Okay.
But anyways, I want to take this time to thank everyone for, well, bearing with us, especially this morning. We had kind of a very problematic glitch with internet-related things, but I think we had upwards of 200 people in the waiting room at one point. And but thank God our production crew, Eric and Jake, they came through after lunch, and we ended up with I guess 20 or so. So better than nothing. And I'm really happy that everyone could join us today. Congratulations once again to Deneen Angwin for being the winner of the 2022 Ivan Founders Award, and for her long time and very significant participation in the SMASH Small Molecule Conference. Thank you very much to all of our speakers today, and great talks, great subject material. And once again, I hope everyone found this to be useful and maybe a little bit fun. We have our beer and wine cocktail hour. I wish our virtual guests could join us today for that, but pop open a beer wherever you might be and join us once again virtually. And thanks again, Dave. Do you have any final words?
I think you said everything, Don, except I'll say let's head for the bar.